All right, let's stay with matters of the Public Protector's Office, joined now by the African Transformation Leader, Vuyolwethu Zungula. They're heading to court to challenge the acting Public Protector's report. This after Advocate Galega cleared President Cyril Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing after the theft of foreign currency from his Limpopo farm. Good to have you, Sam. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Maybe let's start right there. I mean, there's no guessing how you voted on the Section 194 committee.
Look, I did not even attend because that committee, it is clear that it is not about upholding the rule of law and conducting an independent investigation. It is set up to actually find Advocate Mkhwebane guilty, even though the evidence that is there is saying otherwise. And the process that is followed, for example, the Constitutional Court ruled that Advocate Mkhwebane must be allowed legal representation at all steps during the process. We know that there were some issues with the legal representation. There was no money, and she did not suspend herself. And the letter from the president when he was suspending her, it promised that she will be afforded legal representation. Therefore, you cannot have a process now without legal representation because it is clearly in violation of a constitutional court directive. So that is why, as the ATM, we did not take part in this part of the process because it is not a process that is above board. It is not a process that is about the Constitution. Yeah. Rather, it is a process that is about trying to deal with Advocate Mkhwebane.
So on procedure and on law, you believe that this particular decision is going to be challenged in court? Maybe not by yourself, but certainly by the suspended public.
Definitely. The evidence that is there, that committee led by a person, that there are strong allegations of bribery on Mr. Janji, and he refuses to recuse himself. He even recuses that matter be discussed in a committee so that the committee can decide whether a person that has got such serious allegations hanging over him must be allowed to preside.
Did he just come to the committee and he says, no, those allegations are unsubstantiated, so I won't recuse myself? You didn't raise any objections?
It ended there. We've raised objections ever since that this became public knowledge. We raised objections. However, Mr. Janji does not want that to be discussed in the committee, does not want to recuse himself, whereas the evidence is there. There are screenshots, there are voice notes, there is a case number that is opened. Any rational committee of parliament would say these are strong allegations and therefore we do not want this process to be tainted. But the fact that he is staying, he does not want to be recused, it means he wants to continue with this process regardless whether it is tainted or not, and meaning it is not about the people, it is not about upholding the rule of law and protecting the integrity of our institutions. Rather, it is about a predetermined outcome to get rid of Advocate Mkhwebane.
Let's turn to the other issue then, why we brought you here. You are heading to court to challenge the Phala Phala report of the acting public protector. She's been questioned and she has come out to defend her report in some instances, even right here on Newsroom Africa, to say that both on process and on law, she believes that her report is quite cogent. She said, process-wise, this is rooted in the standard operating procedures of the Public Protector's Office. I might say we'll find fault on law and you'll tell us where, but she says, well, law certainly is open to interpretation and it could be that the courts might find your interpretation to be correct or find your interpretation not to be correct. So on those two scores, on procedure and on law.
Look, let's start with procedure. The public protector, there was a court ruling that stated that when there's an investigation, the investigation must be done with an open mind, and it must be done with investigation in mind. It must be done with an open mind, and it must be done with an inquisitive mind. Now, what happens now in this particular process, the advocate Galega refuses to have any oral evidence that is provided by Mr. Ndlovu. Mr. Ndlovu is central to the investigation because it is Mr. Ndlovu who was there at Phala Phala when this money was received. Now, one of the allegations again is that some of the people were actually paid to remain silent so that they do not report about this theft and what happened to the people that were alleged to be thieves. Now, you cannot now have a case whereby you are going to rely only on a written statement, because with Mr. Ndlovu, it is only a written statement that was prepared for him. Whereas if it was an oral engagement, oral evidence that was given by Mr. Ndlovu, obviously there would be other questions that are asked, and therefore the public protector, acting public protector, would get to the bottom of what actually transpired from Mr. Ndlovu. Now, the second person that is key, that was not even investigated, that was not even allowed or give, that did not even give written evidence, it is the domestic worker. It is the domestic worker that is alleged that she is the one that saw the money, she is the one that informed her brothers or cousins, she is the one that is central to the entire thing that happened when it comes to the concealing of the theft and what happened, therefore. But that person has never been asked to provide any form of evidence. Now, from a question of procedure, that is our first issue. The second issue is that you cannot come to a determination that the president did not receive any benefit from Phala Phala without the tax records. Now, her report clearly stated that there are no tax records, whereas there is just a soft loan, and there is no inquiry or scrutiny of this particular soft loan to check whether the interest rate that Mr. Ramaphosa charged Phala Phala, it is a market-related interest rate, to avoid a case whereby a president would inflate the interest rate and pay himself large amount of monies in the pretext of the loan that is paid. Now, in light of those two things, we believe that the acting public protector did not follow the procedure. On the other issue of the substance,
yeah. Let's save the procedure for a little bit, because I want to raise what you're saying. One, it's your preference that you would have liked Mr. Ndlovu to give oral evidence, right? It doesn't necessarily prohibit the public protector from taking a written statement.
No, there's nothing that stops her. Yeah. But in the context of, here is a person that is alleged that there's an allegation that they bought other people. They paid the silence of other people. Now, you have Mr. Ndlovu that has all of the information from the time the money was received from the buyer, what animals were taken. Now, you cannot allow a written statement, because a written statement will be prepared by lawyers, and each and every word there will be carefully crafted to ensure that there is no ambiguity or something like that.
Yeah. But she says she was not investigating the sale. In fact, she narrows her mandate to say, this is what I'm required to do as a public protector. Look at the executive code and investigate whether the executive code was broken, and that's my objective.
Yeah, look, that is what she must do. However, you cannot come to that determination without establishing the facts. The facts relating when was the money received, who came to buy these animals, are the animals there? Meaning you have first-hand evidence from the person that is key in terms of receiving this money. Now, you cannot rely on a written statement, whereas you know that some of the allegations relate that the person that is alleged, which is Mr. Ramaphosa, may have it is alleged that he bought some other people to remain silent. He bought some other people not to conceal the theft. Therefore, it may be that even Mr. Ndlovu did that statement under duress. It is, we can safely believe that Mr. Ndlovu, there's someone that prepared that statement for him. Now, obviously, that evidence, you cannot blindly take such evidence. Whereas with an oral engagement, you are able to ask probing questions.
Right.
Once this question is answered, you can lead to another question in order for you as a public protector to get to the bottom of the truth. Not a case whereby you blindly accept evidence that is brought before you.
ATM leader Vuyolwethu Zungula, they're going to court challenging the acting public protector's report. Of course, you're right to take the report on review. So talk to me about the matters of law that you're saying you'll be challenging.
Yeah, on the question of substance, the public protector in her report admits that the question of paid work, it is to prohibit members of cabinet from actively running a business. Right. That is one. Number two, from being actively involved in any enterprise that is profit-making, to an extent that it would take away their attention from their role in government.
Yeah.
Now, that is what she contends in her report. However, the evidence that is there by Mr. Ramaphosa that he sources buyers, he determines the price, he is actively involved in closing a transaction, not at a higher level, but a specific transaction. However, the conclusion is that because Mr. Ramaphosa does not receive a salary and he is not at the farm on a daily basis, he is not engaged in paid work. Whereas the facts, the evidence that is there, paid work is not a matter of a salary. It is not a matter of being physically in a farm because, look, Mr. Ramaphosa may be in another province, but give advice to the farm managers, to the staffers in Phala Phala to how to handle some of the sales. Yeah. And the fact that the public protector did not get the tax records of Mr. Ramaphosa, therefore she cannot come to a determination that there is no money that is leaving Phala Phala or the Ntabanyoni Close Corporation to Mr. Ramaphosa. That is why we believe that she has made a mistake when she came to a conclusion that Mr. Ramaphosa is not actively involved in paid work, whereas the evidence and her report are clearly stating he is involved.
So she says, by definition, and what they've looked at, remuneration, remunerative work or paid work, as you put it, one, it must demonstrate that maximum of time is spent doing that. Saying the investigation shows there's no such where you'd say maximum time the president spends selling cows. Two, he doesn't sell the cows. He's got a manager that runs the farm. He wasn't there at the time. There was an acting manager there. But there's also a marketing company called Safari that is the one that does the selling. Yes, he's got a member's interest, and he is being briefed, as it were, according to what she's saying on the developments. But on whether on the day-to-day basis he's there or he's looking at selling those things, says there's no evidence of that.
Look, Taba, what is important when it comes to that definition, like we stated, when a person is actively involved in the operations, look, when you are, for example, let's say you have shares in newsroom, yeah. You don't take part in operational decisions as to who is the anchor, who's the editor. Your role is at a strategic level when it comes to attending some of the board meetings. Yeah. However, with Mr. Ramaphosa, not only he's involved in terms of the operations of a company, in terms of determining the price, even having intricate information about the buyers, even telling the manager which parcels of animals need to be sold. He even determines or is even involved in terms of closing a particular transaction, because on the transaction that is in question, he is the one that is saying that money must be stored in a particular place. The transaction will be closed when he returns from holiday in Cape Town.
So are you misunderstanding that particular part? Because her understanding is that that's not the sale. The sale had already happened at that particular time. He was merely informed that there's such money on the premises, and he says, look, I'm going on holiday. Make sure that this money is stored there. Whatever happens to it will be dealt with by the manager when the manager returns.
In his own admission, Mr. Ramaphosa says, I'm in Cape Town. When I am back with the general manager, yeah. We are going to close the transaction. That is the words of Mr. Ramaphosa. So that is why we believe that you cannot have a person that is actively involved in closing a transaction in a company, and then you are going to say he's not actively involved in the running of a business or of a company. And if you look at Section 96 of the Constitution, it states that members of cabinet are prohibited from being engaged in paid work. Yeah. Therefore, it cannot be that you are going to confine paid work to a question of a salary or a question of a person going to a particular place on a daily basis. Because, for example, a person could stay in Cape Town but give advice almost on a daily basis about a company that is in Limpopo. That is a person that is actively involved in the running of that business on a daily basis. His mind is engaged in terms of what should be done in that business. Now, what the provision of the Constitution is trying to avoid is a case whereby you as a president, instead of focusing on your duties or as a president or a minister, you have another responsibility which is profit-driven. Remember, that close cooperation is profit-driven. So each and every decision Mr. Ramaphosa is taking or is actively part of, it is because he has got financial interests. Therefore, he might have split focus between his public responsibilities and his private interests. That is why on the facts, on the evidence, it cannot be that he said he's not actively involved in the running of that business.
So did you raise this question of conflict of interest? Because she says, as far as she's concerned, she doesn't see the potential of risk. Because, I mean, he says the respondents raised a question of, well, what if he's got to expropriate the farm? And maybe there'll be a conflict of interest. They think that's really far-fetched. It's not something that is highly possible.
Look, you know, the question of risk, of conflict of interest, it is a question that is obvious for anyone to see, that not only was there a risk, but that risk actually materialized because you have now a president that has got an incident on his personal property, a property that was not registered in terms of his houses, so that it receives protection from the state. However, when there's this incident, he informs his head of a protection unit, who then goes out actively, goes to Namibia, goes out to actively search for these alleged robbers. And there are some actions that happened after that particular instruction, because Mr. Rode did not just wake up and decide to go after the alleged robbers. It was because of an instruction that came from a president. Therefore,
do you have evidence of instruction? Because she says there is no instruction.
There is an instruction.
She says there is no, in fact, she says there's a precedent that's been set in the Office of the Public Protector, where the previous deputy president, there were cars that were bought for him, for his use. But the Office of the Public Protector found that there was no direct instruction from him for those cars to be purchased, or what type of cars or how much they would cost.
If you read Thabo, the affidavit of Mr. Wale Rode, when he explains what happened, he's the one, he says, he was called to the suite of Mr. Ramaphosa. He was then informed about the theft. Yeah. Now, when there was a follow-up meeting in Hyde Park, again in the president's premises, he was then informed of the money that was stolen, and he was tasked to deal with the matter. Therefore, each and every action that followed, therefore, comes from that instruction from the president that deal with the matter. Because it is that instruction that Mr. Wale Rode used in order for him to actively go to Namibia, search for these guys, involved even people from the presidency in terms of trying to get assistance. All of those things that he did, they stem from that instruction that came from the president. That is not what, it is something that is in the affidavit of Mr. Wale Rode. So that is why we are saying as the ATM, not only was there a risk, but that risk actually materialized because you now have a public official that is mandated to guard the person which is of the president, which is Mr. Ramaphosa, now actively trying to sort out things that happened in the personal farm of the president, which should have been reported via normal processes whenever there's a theft or a burglary. But in this case, it is the head of a protection unit of a president because of an instruction that came from the president.
Mr. Zungula, much appreciated. Thank you very much for coming in and for outlining those for us. That is Vuyolwethu Zungula, leader of the ATM. As you heard, they are heading now to court, officially challenging the report of the acting public protector on the Phala Phala matter.